Hey guys, welcome back to Alienation. Thank you so much for all your feedback on last week's episode. Thank you. It means a lot. Before I actually get into today's case, I am actually going to be covering another true crime case today. See, this one, I knew if I was to ever do any form of series, I knew I had to cover this case. I do unfortunately have some strong yet mixed emotions and opinions about this case, and I'm sure a lot of other people do. On a lighter note, before I get into it, Happy Mother's Day to all you mothers out there, whether you're a mum to your own children, you're a mother figure, you are doing the role of a mother, you are mother to pets, any form of mother out there, Happy Mother's Day. I hope you have an amazing day today. But unfortunately, Mother's Day is actually linked to today's case. And also, again, before I get into it, I just want to say, I really want to hear your opinions on this case. However, this case unfortunately does cover a lot of very sensitive topics. So similar to last week's case, there are topics of asylum seekers, children are involved, mental health is involved, and as I've done my research on this case, I have noticed there are a lot of opinions on this case, and some of them are not always very nice. So please just consider what you're saying before you do comment if you do have a strong opinion about this case. It is a very recent case as well, and there is that very slight chance that family members who were involved in this case could potentially see these comments, so please maybe just be a bit considerate before you leave some comments. That was a long intro, I do apologise. So I just want to say my little disclaimer here. This episode does contain scenes, descriptions and topics that some viewers or listeners may actually find pretty disturbing. So viewer and listener discretion is advised. So today I am actually going to be talking about the case of Emily Jones. This is a very recent case and unfortunately it happened on Mother's Day last year. I do feel very strongly about this case. It makes me exceedingly emotional. One, because it's not a very nice case at all. None of these true crime cases are, but at the same time, this was my hometown. This is where I grew up. It's an intense one and it is very hard to sort of step back from that when it is so close to home, if that makes sense. But this isn't about me, obviously. So I'm going to try my best to not get upset during this one. Here we go. So this case starts off with Mark Jones. He's a credit manager for a law firm and his partner, Sarah Barnes. She was actually a solicitor, so they both had very respectable, decent jobs, and they lived in the lovely area of Doffcocker in Bolton. Yes, I'm a child, and that word always makes me smile. In England, so yes, it is another British case. And on the 18th of January in 2013, they welcomed their baby girl into the world. They named her Emily Grace Jones, and she was a gorgeous little girl, blonde hair, absolutely perfect little baby. But when Emily was just 3 years old, her parents actually chose to separate. However, they remained on good terms. They stayed good friends, which is always incredible for the child because that way they can co-parent really well. There was no tension or anything, and they only lived 5 minutes away from each other. So Emily had a pretty stable life. So Emily actually attended Mark Hill Primary School. This was also in Bolton, and unfortunately at the time of this case, Emily was just 7 years old. People mentioned that she was a beautiful, bright, bubbly, smiley girl, was kind, she was really funny, and you can sometimes, it sounds horrible, you don't want to judge someone from a picture, but just looking at the photos of Emily, you can see how smiley and how happy she was. People said she didn't have a mean bone in her body. She was just overall a very happy child. So last year, on the 22nd of March, this was actually Mother's Day here in the UK. This was a very strange day actually, because this was the day before the UK went into its first proper lockdown. So like I mentioned at the time, Emily was 7 years old on this day, and they woke up, it was Mother's Day, and Emily actually gave her mother a Mother's Day card to celebrate, and she got dressed and she was wearing this little blue navy jacket and it had white and red polka dots on it. So it's just like any other day, any other weekend where she gets to spend time with her parents. And strangely enough for the UK, it was a lovely sunny day, which we don't get many of these. So obviously the family decided to head down to a park. They headed down to Queen's Park in Bolton. This, I know from personal experience, it's a big park. It's pretty big. There is quite a lot there actually. So there's flower beds, there's walks that you can go on. There's a big duck pond there as well. I'm pretty sure there is a child's play area there. I don't know when that was put up, but there is like a child's little play area. So sort of your swings and your climbing frames there as well. There is paths that you can walk on. A lot of them are paved. And there's also the big grass fields. It's a pretty nice park actually. I think it's about 22 acres. It's big. So the family decided to head on down there, like I said, and Emily took her scooter, which she absolutely adored playing on, like most 7-year-old kids do. And the plan was for Dad to watch over her, watch her play, and Mum was going to go on a run. So Sarah headed out on a run, like, good for you, girl, going on a run on Mother's Day, getting that fitness in. And Mark mentioned that she was just zipping up and down on her scooter, having the best time in the world, trying to go as fast as she could. And Mark was egging her on to go faster, you know, like dads do. They're like, go on, you can do faster, you can do a quicker lap. Just overall having a good time. And they were going to watch out for Mum, wave as she was running by, things like that. And the plan was actually to go for ice cream later because it was a nice sunny day. It was Mother's Day. We all love a good ice cream. However, at the same time, a lady named Eltonia Skarner was also heading to Queen's Park. So I'm going to go into a little bit of information about Eltonia before we get back to that day and that time. Eltonia was born on the 21st of February in 1990, which at the time made her 30 years old. She actually came to the UK illegally. She was originally Albania. This is where she was from, where she was born, and she chose to flee to the UK. This was actually arranged by her sister. She paid and had a little deal with a HG driver, which are those big lorries. It was a cross-border freight lorry, so he would like travel with goods or whatever across the borders. So she hitched a ride with him, and as soon as she arrived in the UK, she tried to claim asylum. Unfortunately, this was actually rejected in June of 2018, so she was already here for a few years before everything went through, and she got rejected. And obviously she logged an appeal, which was accepted, and she was given a residency. So it was basically a permit that would last until November 2020. So it would have run out last year. Then she was also granted leave to remain in the UK until 2024, which basically just meant that she could stay. But I think she would have to appeal for the residency, I believe. It's a little bit complicated. Anyway, she lived in a terrace house. This was a little bit unclear as to who she lived with. A few sources say that she actually lived with her mother and her sister. So her mother as well as her sister were also living here in the UK. But then other sources say that she was actually living with another fellow Albanian woman who wasn't related to her, so I'm not too sure on that one, I'm afraid. But there was also reports that where she lived, the front door was nailed shut, which is a little bit bizarre. Anyway, at the time, she was actually an alleged sex worker, and she claimed that she was actually trafficked illegally into Britain, so obviously she was a victim. So she was granted safe residency here in the UK. So going back to the day of Mother's Day last year, Eltonia was actually walking through Bolton Town Centre. There is a lot of CCTV footage of this. I will show a little bit in this episode. And she was wearing a grey and white, kind of looked like a sort of knitted dress, and she actually had a black backpack on her shoulder as well. She was seen just taking a stroll through Bolton. Like I said, it was a lovely sunny day, and at one point she even stopped to have a cigarette, and she was waiting by the bin, finished the last of her cigarette and put it out in the bin, and then carried on about her day. She headed into Crompton Place, which was a shopping mall. Again, I've spent a lot of time in this shopping mall. We actually call it a shopping centre here in the UK, but it is basically just like an indoor shopping mall. And she headed in there and used the toilets, so she had to go down some stairs to use some toilets in there. Then she headed back outside, and she headed into a pound shop of some sort. I don't know if it was specifically Poundland or a Pound Empire. It was just some form of pound shop, similar to sort of the dollar store. And while she was here, she actually purchased some interesting things. She got herself a drink. I mean, it's a sunny day. You need to stay hydrated. But she also bought a pack of craft knives, which, if you're not buying any other crafts, I suppose is a little bit interesting. But then again, if you need a craft knife, you need a craft knife. So it came in a pack of 3. And unfortunately, this would become a bit of a key point in the case later on. So again, Eltonia heads out on her way, and she heads towards Queen's Park. When she arrives there, she just sits down on one of the wooden benches there, just like anyone else would on a nice sunny day. Just sit down, take in the scenery, and enjoy your day. So not far away from Eltonia, Emily and her dad were playing. Emily, again, whizzing around on her scooter, having the best time, and her dad was watching her and also trying to look out for her mum, try and see where Sarah was, without a care in the world. At this point, it's said that Emily actually spots her mum, but obviously her mum is wearing earphones. She can't really hear anyone shouting her, and Emily shouts like, "Mummy, mummy, I want to go and see my mum," and heads off towards her mum. She obviously wants to scoot up to her mum as fast as she can, give her a big hug. So obviously Mark watches her go. He's probably only about 200 yards away from her at this point. However, it's quite a busy sunny day in the park. There's a lot going on. She's whizzing off as fast as she can in the scooter, and apparently everything just happened very, very fast. As Emily passed the bench that Eltonia was sat on, Eltonia stood up, grabbed hold of Emily, and the next thing is just horrendous. So at first, Mark, her dad, thought that she'd fallen over because everything was just happening so fast. The scooter was on the floor. As he looked up, he saw that there was a lady with her, and he at first thought that Emily had fallen off a scooter, and this lady had kindly stood up and helped pick Emily back up, helped her up again, like you do if you see a child fall right in front of you. You think, oh, come here, let's help you back up. So that's what at first her dad just presumed. However, unbeknown to him, there was an absolute horror happening. Within seconds, Eltonia had grabbed hold of Emily off her scooter, took one of the craft knives and slit her throat. A 7-year-old girl, innocent, on her scooter, on Mother's Day, in front of her parents, slit her throat. And she instantly threw Emily to the ground and ran off. So again, Mark didn't quite know what was going on. He presumed she'd just fallen over until he heard probably the most devastating words that you could hear. It was a member of the public just shouted, "She's been stabbed." I have no words as to how you would feel in that situation. It's just horrendous. He ran over to Emily. She was unconscious and she was excessively bleeding. That is not an easy wound, especially for a child to have to deal with. There would have been a lot of blood and it would have just been a horrific scene. Mark actually stated that he was absolutely terrified. He said he just knew it was so bad and you don't survive these kind of things. So imagine having to hold your baby girl, seeing that extensive wound and thinking, I'm going to lose her. And that's what he kept thinking over and over again. And he just kept shouting, "Stay with me, Emily. Please don't leave me." So he actually added that he remembered thinking that it just can't be happening, and this can't be happening to Emily. Eltonia had said nothing to Emily at all, but she was heard screaming, "She tried to kill me," as in Emily tried to kill me, as she fled from the scene. Thankfully, in some of these situations, people come together and try and help, and luckily, members of the public did try to help. They tried to perform CPR and first aid, and they were attempting to stem the blood, help prevent the bleeding, but it was just a catastrophic injury. It's not good. Luckily, there was a man called Tony Canty who was actually at the park on the same day, and he was with his family, so he obviously sort of witness what was going on, and he actually ran after Eltonia Skarner, which is a very brave thing to do. She was an armed lady, and he actually managed to knock her to the ground, tackle her to the ground, and he sat on her until the police arrived, which, if it works, it works. So Mr. Canty actually told the police that Skarner had given her address, which I'm not going to mention just for privacy reasons, and he did actually note that she appeared to be rambling a little bit. Clearly something wasn't quite right. Just going to read from my notes, but he said that she mentioned the Home Office, her family, and that he, Mr. Canty, had killed the girl, so claiming that he'd killed Emily and that he'd killed Miss Skarner's family as well. It was a very brave thing to do, and if he hadn't have stepped in, she could have potentially have escaped. She could have potentially caused more harm to other people, so he did a very brave thing. An air ambulance flew to the scene of the crime and actually took Emily to Salford Royal Hospital. However, her heart had stopped and she did not survive. She was pronounced dead at 3:56 p.m. the same day, which again, it's just heartbreaking. So luckily the police did arrive, and thanks to Tony Canty, they were able to arrest her.
Yeah. Hands.
Turn over.
Take the bag down.
Wait.
Let me take your bag off.
Yes.
Stay still.
Okay.
Hands behind your back.
Thank you.
I think she's killed someone. Have you seen a child anywhere? Is she on her own?
No, everyone's with me. The ambulance is just gone.
Right. A child's down there.
Get down there quick.
It's very hard to read someone, however, she did seem quite calm, in my opinion, for someone who had just murdered a young child.
The ID for Sheila.
Yes, it's in my bag. Everything.
What is?
In my bag, ID, everything.
This female is now in court. She has said there's a white ID in her backpack, which is by the side of the floor.
What's in your backpack?
ID and everything.
ID?
Yes, and the knife.
There are points in the video where she is breathing quite heavy and she does seem a little bit panicked, but you can obviously make up your own opinions from this footage.
And a knife.
15.
Right, the time now is 14:45. At this moment in time, you're under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder. You do not have to say anything, but it may be defensive if you do not mention something when questioned that you later rely in court, and if you do so, may be given evidence. Okay? Your arrest is necessary to protect vulnerable people and to ensure a prompt and effective investigation to this offence.
Yeah.
Okay? What's your name?
Eltonia Skarner. Eltonia Skarner.
Okay. Where do you live? In Stone.
Yes.
Right, sweat there.
So as you've just seen, at the time she was arrested for attempted murder because at the time, fortunately, Emily was still alive. However, this did actually change and she was now arrested for murder due to the outcome.
Just confirm to you, what's inside your bag?
You can control. It's just no bombs, no nothing.
No
It's just
bombs.
my ID card.
ID card.
In my mom's ID card.
Yeah.
There's a knife, some water, some juice.
Okay.
Nothing.
Okay, that's it. So there's
That's
nothing
it.
that's going to hurt
in the
me, no?
bag. No.
Okay.
So Antonia was actually taken to and held at Rampton Hospital, I believe. It's like a high security facility or hospital in Nottinghamshire. And there, obviously, she awaited her trial. However, like I mentioned, lockdown happened and everything got postponed. It was an absolute nightmare here in the UK, so you couldn't really be close to anyone, you had to keep your distance, so I'm pretty sure a lot of it kept getting postponed, and at the same time they were assessing her mental health as well. It was just a bit of a mess. I'm pretty sure a lot of the procedures were done not face to face. She was in not on a Zoom call, obviously, but sort of on a camera sort of system, so there was nothing officially done face to face at the time, but eventually they finally got a date. So it was in November, her hearing, and Skarna actually denied the charge of murder. She pled not guilty, and I don't want to say they used the mental health card because mental health is an extremely important thing and it is a very, very tough situation, but that was used straight away. They claimed that she wasn't well, she was mentally ill, and that she couldn't actually be held for murder. So I'm just going to talk about some of the things that we actually learned during the trial, things that were brought to light. In a lot of cases, they try and dig for as much information as they can, and they learn quite a bit. So it turns out Antonia Skarna actually lied about being sex trafficked. She played a victim so she could seek asylum here in the UK. She claimed that she never was sex trafficked, which obviously is not a great start. And then 7 months after she actually arrived in England, she was assessed by a doctor and he said she was suffering from PTSD, but she didn't actually attend the planned cognitive behavioural therapy session, and a case was just closed. However, she did actually get taken to a mental health hospital where she was being treated and cared for and constantly assessed. And it said that on several occasions while she was staying at this hospital, she would actually be granted leave. It would always be like chaperoned leave, so she'd always have someone with her, and she would always try and run off and would have to be returned by police. She wasn't well, she was put on various amounts of medication, and she would actually refuse to take her oral medication, which apparently was a very important medicine that she needed to take to help her illness. So she ended up being given depot injections, which is like a slow form release of an antipsychotic medication. But she was released back into the community. They deemed her not a threat to anyone, and she actually took those injections for the next 5 years. But she started to complain about the side effects of these injections, and she claimed they were making her very unwell. And even though she had history of rejecting oral medication and she refused to take it, she was trusted to take oral medication instead by herself. I am not a medical professional, but that makes no fucking sense. But anyway, like I said, yeah, she was just trusted to take her own medicine orally, which we knew she didn't like doing and refused to do. And this actually led to her relapsing multiple times. No surprise there. I just want to note as well that apparently her own mother didn't agree with her taking medication, and she didn't agree with the fact that she was given medication because she believed in spiritual healing instead, which each to their own, but I don't know how strong spiritual healing is. If it's going to stop someone from slitting a child's throat, then it'd be nice to see some evidence of that. So other things we learn while she was in court and on trial was that she was, like I said, admitted to a psychiatric hospital. So this was in 2015 because apparently she had threatened her neighbour with a knife. A lot of sources do actually state it was just a weapon, but a lot of them do say it was a knife. And apparently she threatened her neighbour's daughter as well. There was claims that she'd threatened a 13-year-old girl. So she'd already been wheeling weapons around. She'd already threatened potentially children as well as other people. It's not looking very good. However, that side of things, so her threatening a potential 13-year-old girl, wasn't included in her whole risk assessment. Obviously, she was let go, but then in 2017, she was detained again after she had threatened her sister and also stabbed her mother in the hand and hit her over the head with an iron. Yeah. Very bizarre. So again, it's not looking very good. She clearly needed help, she clearly needed to be on medication, and she clearly needed to be monitored, but she constantly was just let back into society and deemed as not a threat. So someone somewhere has gone very wrong. While she was in custody and while the trial was going on, her flat was actually searched by the police. This is just sort of a common courtesy thing. They have to look into these sort of things. And the police actually discovered her antipsychotic medication, which she was on her meds. Like, they're gonna discover it. However, they found about a month's worth of medication that she had not taken. So, like I said, she didn't like taking her meds, and she wasn't taking her meds. So she clearly was not in a good mental state. So on the 4th day of the trial, one of the psychiatric nurses from Rampton Hospital, I believe his name was Jonathan Petit. Sorry for any mispronunciations again in this one. And he actually said that Altonia had told him, "I killed someone. That's the reason why I'm here. It was premeditated. I waited in the park. I picked my victim and I killed somebody. And I tried to run away." Bit intense, but there's your confession. And then again, I'm so sorry for the pronunciation, but a doctor, Syed Afghan, I'm so sorry. He was a forensic psychiatrist consultant. God, there's so many words. And he said on the 6th day of the trial that Skarna had a history of violence. She was known to be a violent person when she wasn't medicated. So again, I'm just reading off my notes here. It says it was mutually agreed while she was at the Rampton Hospital that they would stop the antipsychotic medication so they could observe her, and the staff observed that Skarna was starting to behave strangely. She was seen, this makes my blood boil a little bit. It's a tough one because I don't want to be throwing opinions around, because obviously she was suffering massively from her mental health and she wasn't medicated, so it is a tough one. But it was noted that she was seen laughing hysterically at the television because the TV basically was showing a girl who highly resembled Emily. And in another incident, Skarna became enraged and was frothing at the mouth. Dr. Afghan resumed the course of antipsychotic medication on the 16th of October, and that it was testified in court that there was an ample evidence that Skarna had paranoid schizophrenia, depending on how you pronounce it. So obviously they've done like a little test and they've noticed a huge improvement and a huge change from when she's medicated and not medicated. So it's very, very obvious that she is mentally ill. So it came to Friday, the 4th of December. I remember this day very, very clearly because I was enraged. I was so angry. I remember hearing this, reading the news articles, and I just remember crying from anger. I was so pissed. Basically, Altonia was completely cleared of her murder charge. The charges were dropped and she wasn't going to get done for murder. So basically, jury had actually been asked by Mr. Justice Wall, so the person in charge of the whole court procedures. He asked them to formally find Altonia Skarna not guilty of the offence. Imagine Emily's family hearing that. So instead, she pleaded guilty to the lesser offence of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. So obviously, yes, they were leading the case with she was left unsupervised, she's mentally ill. So the things we found out in the case was that Skarna's own sister had warned staff constantly of her illness. She'd also reported that she was refusing to take her meds. And Mark Jones, Emily's father, even stated that he believed Altonia was just a ticking time bomb. She clearly wasn't well and she just kept getting left. There was no one sort of taking responsibility, no one looking after her, no one making sure she wasn't a threat to society. So again, this was supposed to be a quote from Mark himself, so I will be reading this off my notes. It says it's absolute nonsense. They're just trying to relinquish all responsibility. So this was obviously the part of the NHS that was supposed to have been looking after her. And she was their responsibility. They knew she didn't comply with oral medication, but they allowed her to take it on her own volition. That is a ridiculous thing to do. She was a ticking time bomb. Personally, I agree with him on that. That's fine if you don't agree. She didn't want to take medication, was refusing to take a medication. When she wasn't on her medication, she was a threat. She was violent, yet they were like, she's fine. Off you go. So apparently when Skarna was actually questioned about her feelings in the few months after she'd committed this crime, and they wanted to know, like, how do you feel about it? Like, what, you took someone's life. Apparently she said, what do you want me to do? Cry all the time? Yes! You've murdered a child. A lot of people did actually note that she didn't seem too bothered about what she'd done. She had no remorse, multiple things like that. But again, we don't understand what her mental state was. Like, we are not in her shoes. Unless you are in that person's position, you don't know what she's suffering with. So it is a tough one. I'm very torn. I don't want to sit here and judge her and say, like, that's disgusting to say something like that. But at the same time, that is not a very nice thing to say, is it? That she basically don't give a shit that you've killed someone. She also was said to say, I killed someone. That's why I'm here. It's been 3 months and I just want to put it behind me. She clearly knows what she did. She's more than aware of what she physically did, but the emotional side of things, we just don't know. So like I mentioned, this was at the time of the pandemic. Everything was going a little bit crazy. It was a very, very tough time for the family. So Emily's body was actually released and it was confirmed like she was allowed to be buried. Unfortunately, gatherings weren't allowed. Emily's friends and family, like the extended family, weren't allowed to attend her funeral. So not only have her family heard that she's been cleared of murder, they now can't give her the funeral that she deserves. I know funerals aren't a celebration, but you should be able to throw them the best funeral you can to celebrate the little life that they had and just be with your friends and family, be able to give them the funeral they deserve. She was a beautiful little girl who everyone loved, yet not many people could attend her funeral. It's just heartbreaking. But anyway, back to the case and the trial. Apparently weeks before the murder, community health professionals were actually satisfied that Eltonia Skarna was apparently stable and she didn't pose a threat at all to herself or others. However, she wasn't actually seen by a community psychiatrist nurse for 3 months until that last visit. So that last visit was March the 11th, I believe. So she hadn't been monitored at all. These people who were supposed to be checking in, making sure that she was taking medication, nothing was done. No one had seen her and assessed her. However, on March the 11th, she was actually seen by Victoria Fagan, and she told the trial that this meeting was apparently so uneventful that she didn't even take notes. Like, that's how, I don't want to say sane, but that's how sound of mind Eltonia apparently seemed. Like, she came across that she was completely fine. And apparently when Miss Fagan returned back from leave, she returned back to actually find that Eltonia had committed this murder, and she said that she was so shocked by this. She actually stated that she thought Eltonia was a really nice girl and that she couldn't believe she was capable of this. Her past notes state otherwise, but... So we're just going to jump ahead to the 8th of December. Eltonia Skarna was charged and convicted of manslaughter. So probably a bit more of a relief for the family that there was some form of justice being done, and Eltonia actually received a life sentence. However, she was also given a minimum term of only 8 years before being eligible for release. 8 years. Emily hadn't even been able to celebrate her own 8th birthday, which would have been earlier this year. And apparently, if she is deemed as well again, I say well again in quotations, if she is deemed to be mentally fit again, she will walk and will be released. It's a tough one, again, because you can't judge someone on their mental health. Mental health can be terrifying. It can be horrendous what some people have to go through, but at the same time, someone's baby girl was murdered in front of them. So Eltonia was actually detained in a psychiatric hospital instead of a prison. Again, I'm just going to read from my notes because it gets a little bit confusing here, but this was what was said. Skarna has the possibility of being transferred from hospital to prison to serve the remainder of her sentence if her condition improves sufficiently. So say, for example, within the next year, she's deemed as she's okay, she's mentally well again, or she's not suffering as much, she will move from the hospital to the prison and will finish her sentence there. However, due to the pre-trial detainment period, so before the trial, she was obviously detained, she was kept at the high security prison/hospital. 196 days were actually reduced from her 8-year minimum sentence. So we do actually have a bit more of an update because a year has passed. So January 26, 2021 of this year, Skarna's minimum sentence was actually increased. So it went up from 8 years to 10 years, and I think about 8 months. And apparently Justice Wall actually messed it up because a new law was passed in 2020 to do with sort of how they work out the dates and everything for what you do receive for your sentence. And he said that he claims full responsibility for that. At least he messed up and she got more time instead of less, because that would have just been heartbreaking for the family. Anyway, Justice Wall did actually state and told Eltonia, you will remain in hospital or prison for the rest of your life. But let's talk about some form of positive outcome from this. There isn't really a positive outcome from this because Emily was taken from this world. It's not a positive outcome. However, like I mentioned, she was a pupil at the Markland Hill Primary School. The school actually announced some plans for a little memorial garden in there, which is great because another reason as to why I'm doing this case, she can't be forgotten. She was taken from this world way too soon and she needs to be remembered. So the fundraising target was actually £5,000 and it was reached within 12 hours, which is insane. And it actually passed that, and I think they hit about £11,000 or £12,000. So the head teacher, she's called Louise Close, she actually said that they wanted a lasting legacy at the school. That's what they wanted to do for a little girl who was taken way too soon. And also a separate fundraiser was actually started by Mark and Sarah, and they raised over £10,000 within 24 hours. And those funds were actually going to Bolton Lads and Girls Club, which brings back a lot of weird memories. It's basically like a facility where kids can go like after school and on weekends, and I don't know, they do like sports there with them, so you can do activities, games, it's like colouring. I remember there used to be like a little tuck shop, we used to call it. You used to take like little pocket money and buy yourself some like sweets and stuff while you were there. I don't know if that's still a thing. They actually ended up reaching over £25,000 by the time the criminal sentencing came in December, which is incredible. Very, very small victories out of a very shit situation. That is actually the end of this case. I just want to say to anyone involved, family and friends, especially to Emily's parents, that I'm so, so sorry. It shouldn't have happened. It never should have happened. It's just absolutely tragic, especially with it being Mother's Day. That must be a very hard day for the family. So I'm so, so sorry. And I hope at some point you can find some form of peace. But thank you guys so, so much for watching. Please let me know down below your thoughts on this case. Again, please keep it friendly. Keep the comment section a nice, safe place. Feel free to let me know what you think. If you are watching on YouTube, please give it a massive thumbs up. Like I said, leave me a comment down below and subscribe if you are not. My social media is all linked down below as well, so feel free to check me out over there. If you are listening on some form of podcast streaming service, please rate, review, share whatever you can. And yeah, I'm going to end it there. So please be a good person, stay safe, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!